Welcome to introduction of thermal imaging cameras by the Cole County Fire Protection District. We have 7 thermal imaging cameras. We have one on every engine, and we have a Scott on 1431. The camera on 1401, the newer version of the TICs that we own, actually has video capabilities. So if there's something that you would like to show, train on, something you've seen within an incident, we'd want to get the camera off of 1401, take a video of what you're doing. It's always recording, so once you turn it on, it records. Get the date stamped back to the training department, and we have a cable that hooks up to it, and we'll pull the video off, and then we can show and use those things for training. But that's the only one that has that capability. Where did thermal imaging cameras came from? Well, they started in the UK and Europe. They were intended for military use, but in the 80s, the fire service started using them. It was really, really expensive back then. Things are getting a whole lot cheaper. You can actually buy a thermal imager for less than $4,000. That's of really good quality now. But within 2 years, it's obsolete and they make a better one already. What is a thermal imaging camera? It's another tool for your toolbox, just like a radio or your backpack. It's something that you need to take with you at all times. The thermal imaging camera should not be an afterthought. This should be something that we grab immediately. When we're grabbing in our air pack and going to go inside, it needs to be in with us on the nozzle. If we're going to do a 360, we need to have one in our hand as a first-in officer or firefighter that's doing a 360 of the house. You can use that camera to see what's going on inside the house using temperature. So we could possibly see where our fire room is before we even get started. We have a smoky house. We might be able to see that really easy. So the basics of our thermal imaging camera. So our TIC is not X-ray vision. It is temperature and transfer temperature in material. And we have to understand that it's just a variation of temperatures, and that's all we're looking at. We're not looking for something that glows red hot. That's not the way this works. The thermal imaging is a pictorial representation of temperature. It's a game of comparisons and contrasts, so we're going to have to really use them and understand what the blacks and whites mean, and sometimes the yellows and reds. A hot seat of a fire could be white, depending upon the temperature range that the thermal imager is in. So we'll need to look at the range you're in order to understand that. One of the things that thermal imagers do, though, sometimes they burn your senses or give you a tunnel vision. So you've got to be careful and use all of your senses all the time. Don't just keep your eyes within the thermal imager and become tunnel vision to where you can't see what's right in front of you. So at times you're going to need to pull that imager away, get a good view of what you can see, and then bring it back. So here's an emitter exercise that you can do. If you cover a gloved hand like this gentleman's right hand is covered, look at the pictorial view of the TIC. It's black. Well, all that means is there's no heat. White means that there's heat. So our body is 97 degrees. So you can see in this picture view, the person's arms are 97 degrees. And if you look at your temperature range over here, we're way down here at 100. So we're in the lower range of our temperature screen right now. So the low contrasting side is all temperatures are about the same. So the example of that would be you have an air conditioning room and everything in it is about the same temperature. So you're not going to see any real contrast in what you're viewing. High contrast would be the white is the hottest, black is the coolest. Other temperatures are marked in various shades of gray. The hot ceiling may be white, it could be yellow, could be red, depends upon the temperature in which your thermal imager is in at that point in time. You'll need to see all that to understand where you're at. Constantly monitor the thermal side of it. What's going on? Am I in a 100 degree? Am I in a 200 degree temperature? Where is that at? By knowing that, you'll be able to see that my white is 200 degrees, my white is 100 degrees. You're just going to have to look at that at all times. You're going to want to constantly monitor the thermal layer within the house so you know if something is going to happen. You have hot smoke, heat, and gases coming down upon you, and it is a darkness up above in the thermal imager when you're looking at it, and down below you can see more clearly, and there is less white. It's more dark low, more white up above. This is your thermal layer. So you're going to have to watch that and constantly monitor it and be in direct communication with your team on what you're finding at all times. So I'm finding a window sill, I'm finding a door, thermal layer is down to 3/4, we're going to have to ventilate. These are all things crew needs to talk about. So what will a tick do for you? Well, it allows you to see within certain areas that you can't normally see without it. Flashlight can only see through so much. Smoke, can't see through it with a flashlight. With a thermal imager, you'll be able to see through some of that and see a little bit more of what you're doing to do a primary search faster, to find the seat of the fire faster, these types of things. What does a tick do? It assists us with size up, finding the seat of the fire, hopefully finding a patient faster and getting them out. That's what we're using them for. What a thermal imager will not do, you can't see underwater. You can see on the top of the water. You can't see through windows and windshields. So here's a prime example. You got a firefighter sitting in a window, and you can see that it looks like it's all one color except for just the head of the guy. So what's the temperature below the window? You can't really see. It just looks black. And then again, on the metal of the vehicle, you can't see behind it either. It's just a black representation. So these are things you have to understand, the limitations of the tick and what you're doing with them. Also, can't see through furniture. It doesn't see through walls. It will see the heat within the walls, but it can't see through the walls. This is not X-ray vision. What should a thermal imager not do? Well, how about leaving it on the truck? Never use it as a door stop. Don't abuse it. It is an expensive piece of equipment, and it's electronical, so anything you do to it might damage it if it's dropped. That's why we have lanyards, so you can hook them on and you don't drop them. We need to maintain them, keep them clean, rotate our batteries, make sure they stay charged so that we can use them each and every time we go out. Components of the thermal imagers, they are fragile. So at some point in time, it's going to malfunction. We've already had a couple that we've sent in to get fixed. We've had a couple with battery issues. These things happen. We send them in, we get them fixed, we move on down the road. Thermal imagers will dull your senses. I talked to you about tunnel vision. So if you're using a thermal imaging camera a lot and you're not getting it away from your eyes and looking around to see where you're at, that's what we're going to call tunnel vision, and it can dull your senses of what's going on. In my opinion, you can actually get lost more by doing 95% thermal imager and not getting away to use your senses. So plan on things happening. Thermal imagers fail, you get tunnel vision, next thing you know, you've dropped the hose line and you don't even know where to find it anymore. So thermal imagers are not the answer. The biggest thing is we have to remember our basics. We always want to stay with our basics. Thermal imager, another tool, just like the hose line. It's another tool that we need to do our job. Uses, what can we do with them? Rapid intervention teams, wild searches. So we have a elderly patient that's gotten out of the home late at night. Can we go out and search for them? Yes, we've used them for it. They work great. We can use them for confined space underground searches. We can use them to look at light ballasts and electrical motors to see if they're hot, HVAC systems to see if something's hot. We can search the top of water. We can search for ejected patients and limb searches. We can use them for overhaul. Lots and lots of things that we can use an imager for. We can use them around doing our 360 so that we can see where the seat of the fire possibly is, or at least where the high heat is within that house or whatever we're working on. We can use them in aircraft, arson, any types of where did the fire spread to, walls, attics, utility chases, those kind of things. We can take them on the roof with us. We're going to have to go up and do a roof ventilation. We should be able to use that to see exactly where our trusses are and know then where to cut. So if we have high heat straight underneath of us, that's the seat of the fire, or at least the main heat of the fire. So that tells us where we're going to do vertical ventilation. We can also track animals with it, just like humans. And for, saving exterminator bills, we can do a mouse hunt in the firehouse. Sometimes things have to be fun. So light ballast, you can see it here. When you see it through the thermal imager, it just looks like a different representation. But if you put the crosshatch of the thermal imager up on that light ballast, you'll be able to see where the hottest point is and see if it's overheated compared to another light that's in the same house or building. We can also use it for containers. Different hot and cold within the containers will tell you how much fluid capacity, or not capacity, but how much fluid is in it. If it's half full, 3/4 full. Here's some metal containers, a little harder to see in them if there's anything in them. I don't know from the picture how full they were, but there's really no representation there if they're full or empty. Can't really see like we did in the plastic container. Here's a sealed LP container. Again, can't really tell possibly about this fluid line. Down here is where that carbon wrap was. So you see it's a different representation as well. Big transport vehicles would be the exact same way. You see the representation of the temperature line right here, so this thing is pretty full. You can see a roof line profile when you're using the thermal imager as well. So you got nice heat down here within the walls, and then that stops, and you got lots of white right up here. So it can give you some ideas without actually getting on the roof where things are at within whatever you're looking at. So it could also be used for roof navigation. You have to get on top of a commercial structure. You're in the middle of the night. You don't know what's going on. It's smoky in the middle of the day. You can use it to possibly find where all of these lines run, where the HVAC system stuff is, so that you know you can't go through here. You can also see right here is your trussing system. So where would be the safest place to be? Right on that rail while you're up on the roof doing work. You locate a hot spot within a building, possibly using a piercing nozzle to get to it. Depends upon what you have on your department. Sizing up for fire location. Here we have a mobile home. If we look around the mobile home, can we see anything during the day? But if we take the thermal imager, you can see the heat resignation within here. Our highest heat is back over here towards the center or the rear of this. So naturally, we're going to want to head in that direction. Check for fire extension. You can see what we've got here. Got a small fire. Well, did it actually get in the walls? Here's a heat representation behind the walls. So yeah, we're going to want to tear some of that apart so we can see behind it. We tear it apart, we notice no charring, anything going on behind it. Hey, things are good. We're done with this. It's taken care of. We do more extension in different parts of the house. Here we remove a big piece of, stove or whatever was here. And you look behind it, there's some heat representation behind it yet in the walls. So maybe we tear that apart and look back in there. But we're looking for contrast with extension. We're looking to see if there's something about the heat in this area that we would need to take it apart in order to make sure that fire extension hasn't happened. We can use it for electrical outlets. Sometimes we get a call, a smell of smoke. If you walk around the house and you check all of the outlets and you find one that's glowing like this one here, well, here they're marking it out. I say kind of take an idea of what you got. Don't mark on somebody's walls. But if we find this breaker and we turn the breakers off, and in 20 minutes we come back and this heat glow area has lessened, it's gotten smaller. Did we fix the problem at hand? Yeah, most probably. We tripped the breaker, everything is going, heat is going away, dissipating. Things are getting back to more of a natural color like over here. So we should be good. Can we also take the plate off, take a look behind it? We certainly can. Or we can leave it up to the folks. You need to call an electrical contractor. We're going to shut this breaker off. Have a nice day. So monitor the area. Is it decreasing? If it is, well then great. Things are going the way we want it. Everything's what we want. When's the time to open up the wall? Well, if you see this amount of heat and you disable the breaker, and you know you've disabled the breaker, and that heat keeps rising, we're probably going to have to get back in that area to find out what it is. But if we take the breaker away and the heat starts to dissipate, we've done our job, we should be fine. Thermal transfer. So you can see where the guy took his hand and just placed on this piece of insulation, where over here you see that that heat transfer out of him was black, but yet there's white up in here. There's no coloring up in this area where the black is of it. So heat representation is different. Depends upon the thermal range that your tick is actually in at the point in time that you're using it. So you have to watch the side where the heat temperature gauge is to tell you what's going on. Why are you not seeing yellows and reds? Because now I'm seeing whites and blacks because of the temperature range. So here you can see the house, and you notice up high, we've got some high heat in this corner from something. Is there an air duct in this corner? What would have caused that? That's what we would start needing to be looking at. HVAC performance problems, water rescue and ice rescue. These are all things that we can do with our thermal imager. You'll notice the person over here in the ice, a person over here in the water floating. You see a different representation of heat. Things we use it for in the training department is we use a set every time you guys are doing your basic skills. We want to watch you, see how you're doing with your hose handling, see if your search pattern is, if you're doing great with your search pattern, talking to your teams. This allows us to watch, see what's going on, identify some things that we may need to train on to get things better. That's why we don't use a thermal imager in training very often, is because we want that base knowledge and skill instilled in our firefighters, so that if you don't have a thermal imager or it breaks down, you know exactly what you need to be doing at all times. So thermal imaging can be used in wildland brush fires. We can spot our hot spots. We can apply our water better, save our valuable resources, water usually. Doing searches with a thermal imager. So when you do an interior search, we want to keep everybody safe. We want to do it as a team like we always do. We want to search in a pattern. We want to do it the way our organization tells us to do it, and we definitely want to communicate. We have to communicate what we see through our team. We also need to communicate what we see from inside out to our incident command. Okay? Incident command doesn't need to know that we've found a door. We've got a window here on the right wall. What they need to know is if we find something so that they can deal with it. We've found a patient. They need to be able to contact EMS and have resources coming at that point in time so that we can take care of the patient when we get them outside. Other things that we need to be doing, we need to use our senses. Keep in mind that this thermal imager is great, but you don't want to get reliant on it. You want to be able to use all of your senses in what we're doing. We want to stay low. One of the things a thermal imager does, in my opinion, is folks stand up. They want to use it and look around. And as soon as you do that, you get up in the upper thermal layer. Now it's really hot up there. And the only thing you did was just not think about the basics. Staying low because of high heat. Use the imager down low. We also crawl on our hands and knees for the reason to make sure there's a floor in front of us to go through. You can't see holes in floors with thermal imagers. So it's important that we stay with the basics. We use the thermal as an added tool. Every now and again, we're going to call it a reality check. You're looking around, you're doing work with your tool, with your thermal imager. You need to put it down and look around. Let your other senses take a look, orient you to what's going on, and then move forward to the next step. So what do we use our TIC for? Well, biggest thing is life safety, property conservation. So we're looking for occupants down, firefighters, thermal layering. What's going on with the heat, smoke, and gases within the house that we're working in? Where's the fire source? Can we find it? What's the structural integrity of this house we're in or building that we're in for our crew so that we stay safe? So we use a six-sided approach when we teach thermal imaging. We're going to look up, we're going to look down, we're going to go left, right, center. We're going to see what we have. We're going to look for anything and everything. And finally, you never want to forget, but behind you. You always take a nozzle with you, and you never leave a nozzle because you don't know what you're going to encounter when you're egressing or getting out of a structure. So we always want to look behind us and make sure that nothing is going on behind us, that everything is okay. All of our crew is there and accounted for behind us. Whether the thermal imager is at the back of the line or the front of the line, we're always looking six-sided to make sure everybody's okay and where we're going. The thermal operator needs to make sure that everybody on the crew is good. So a camera-directed search would be the thermal operator walks into the room or crawls into the room, looks the room over, and then directs the crew throughout the space on what he wants them to check that he can't see with a thermal device. You have to manually go and look. So I can't see under a couch, behind a couch, so we manually have to go and move the couch and look behind it. You could use the TIC inside the room, or you could stay at the door. The camera directed is when they stay at the door and direct the crew what to look at. So the camera-led search then would be when the thermal operator walks into the room and gets everything looked at inside, has the crew help him get things moved so he can look around, see what's going on. If you're not needed inside the room, the crew stays at the door and waits on the guy with the tick to come back to the crew. So point to point, it accelerates the search. The tick operator processes inside, does the search, sees what he can see. If he can see it all, great, move on. If he can't, we look at whatever he can't see and we move on. This is the whole reason that the fire service got into thermal imaging, is so we could speed up our searches, find our patients faster, and get out a lot sooner. So here's some tips. Review where you've been. Always look behind you. Check for changing conditions in the home or the commercial structure. Communicate often and clearly. Make sure everyone around you knows what's going on. Establish landmarks. Like I said, windows, doors. If you open a door and there is not a back porch or a patio, you got to tell the crew. Because if something goes wrong and you guys back out to this room and try to make access or egress out of that house or structure, and you open the door and there's no deck. This is something that we had to know while we were searching, not whenever we need an emergency egress. Do not forget your basic fundamentals that we teach you. Basics, basics, basics all the time. Reality checks often. Get a second opinion. Let a searcher see the area previous to them going and searching. Allow them to use the tick for a moment or two before they go in and search. Ticks can fail. Ticks will fail. They can't see through water. Depth perception. When you're using it, your depth perception is altered. That's why we say 30 seconds, get it down, look around, get your basis back, and start again. Glass and smooth surfaces will reflect these images, so you have to be careful. This is a problem. Okay, common mistakes made, relying solely on the camera. The thermal operator strays from the rest of the crew, and now the crew's got no idea what in the world's going on because he was in charge telling us what to do. If you leave the wall or the hose line, that's another problem for the crew. If you have a thermal imaging camera that doesn't take place of that hose line, that gives you the way out. Make sure you communicate with all of your crew all the time. Never stand up when you're running your thermal imager. Stay on the ground. Remember your bases. Crews a lot of times will get up and walk or run through buildings trying to search, and that's the wrong thing to do. We're not on the ground. We don't know there's a hole in the floor. We're walking up in the heat. There's so many things that can go wrong. We just need to remember these are mistakes, and it's not what we do. Other mistakes, we miss exits because we're going through with the thermal and not slowly doing our search with our hands, finding the places of egress. If we have manpower limitations, we have 2 guys going with a thermal imager and we try and do the job of 5. We can't do it. We have to have the right amount of people to do the job properly. Sometimes thermal imager will actually slow the operation. If you're not familiar with it, if it's a new thing to you and you're just not sure how to use it and what it all means, you aren't going to be proficient with it. So fall back to your basis and go into the left, into the right, do a standard search that we teach you in our basics. One of the things that you can also miss is holes in the floor. Because of the difference in temperature, you're not going to see a hole in the floor. It's going to look black just like everything else. So seeing thermally is like learning a whole new language. You got to use it in multiple situations to understand what the color contrasts mean. So it's just something we're going to have to train with and play with more at every scene. We usually see differences in objects, and sometimes they're not obvious. So sometimes doors are visible and other times they're not. These are just things that happen because of temperature. When we use it properly, it can save times, reduce effort, and improve our safety. However, if we don't, it could be devastating. So we need to learn to use it as a separate tool in our tool shed. Know your limitations and those of the imager. Know the capabilities of yourself, the imager, and your crew, and understand it changes the way you do the job. Use the thermal on every crawl so that we understand how it works and what those different views mean so that it works for you when you truly need it. Scan the exterior of the building. You might be able to find the fire location or extension. It also can help us in proper resource assessments and how big a fire or how small a fire we might have. It can be used in ladder operations. Take it with you on the ladder. Don't wet down smoke because you can't see it. You'd be able to use this and see where the heat is needed or where the heat's at so you can put the water where it's needed. The interior crews, take it with you. It's your third eye. Rely on the information that your crew gives you. Use the thermal to back it up. See things that might not be able to be seen without the thermal device. Don't forget the basics, folks. I can't explain that enough. The imager is only as good as the people operating and the training you've had. Confirm the locations of your doors, windows, and furniture by touching it. Put your hands on it and call out to your team. There's a door here. Where does it go? It goes into a closet. There's a door here. It leads exterior that is on a concrete pad. There is not a deck outside of this door. Things the whole crew needs to know. Remember, put your camera down and get your other senses to work. Grab it and go again. How can crews get lost in familiar surroundings? Well, it's easy to get lost if you don't stay with the basics. Orientating yourself within a building using a thermal imager, it may all look the same, and the next thing you know, you've gone someplace where it's just a maze of one big circle. Had you had your hose line, you go in, you follow the hose line out. So it's always important to stay with your basics. Thermal imager is a helper, but we need a hose line out. So questions. Will a thermal imaging camera show you a room that's about to flash? It won't show it to you, but it will give you information about it. So when you look up, you should be able to see a hot temperature room up high. When you look through the thermal layer from you being on your knees, you should be able to see that temperature rise when you go up and understand that you need to get out of there and ventilate this building. If only one imager is available, should it stay with a rapid intervention team or should it go inside? Well, folks, if I had the choice and only had one camera, it would go inside because you don't use a rapid intervention team unless something goes wrong. So we would use it to go in and find our victims, find the seat of the fire, get the building construction layout, do our job, get in, get it done, and get out safely. If we do that important task, we won't need a rapid intervention team. Should the imager lead or follow? I'm not going to tell you that it must lead, it must follow. It needs to go with the crew. When the crew goes inside the building, they have a third eye. They can look around and see things that you can't see without it. That's the most important thing. I think we're safer with it. We just have to train with it, and we have to understand it's another tool for our tool shed. Thanks. Have a great day.